बेसिक सोलो मॉडल। इन अ बेसिक सोलो मॉडल, जब हम सोलो मॉडल शुरू ही करते हैं, we talk about two kind of equations. There are two main equations that we study in the Solow model. The first equation that we have, that is the equation of the production function. A production function क्या है? So what is a production function? Production function is functional relationship between input and output. Production function is a functional relationship between input and output. तो जब हम ऐसे कहते हैं that I am going to employ some labor and some capital and I will produce some level of the output, right? This relationship that I have written, relationship between inputs and output, that relationship becomes my production function. इसी को हम production function बोल देते हैं, right? That's the first thing. The second important equation which we will be studying in the Solow model, that will be called as the capital accumulation equation. उसको हम बोलेंगे capital accumulation equation. The capital accumulation equation will basically go ahead and tell us how capital is going to grow over time. So accumulation means what? Accumulation means इकट्ठा करना, right? So how I am going to go ahead and how I am going to change my capital over time, कैसे इकोनॉमी में कैपिटल चेंज होगा ओवर टाइम, दैट विल बी कॉल्ड एज कैपिटल accumulation equation. Now just try to think about it. What are the reasons why capital can go ahead and change over time? Well, the first reason why capital can change, that can be that there can be investment, right? So if you do investment, जैसे आज तक I had, for example, I had one machine. Now I purchased two more machines, right? So when I will be doing investment, when I will buy new machines, that will increase my capital, right? The second reason why capital can change over time will be depreciation. When there will be depreciation, depreciation means wear and tear of capital. Wear and tear of capital. That means that there is going to be decline in capital. Capital कम होने वाला है. So when there is going to be depreciation of the capital, it is going to go ahead and decrease the amount of my capital. Okay. So investment increases the amount of capital. Depreciation decreases the amount of capital. When we go ahead and when we take these two things together, जब हम इन दोनों चीजों को ही एक साथ कंसिडर करते हैं, when we try to go ahead and consider both these things together, then that basically goes ahead and gives rise to capital accumulation equation. So capital accumulation equation basically tells us what is going to be the change in capital over time. एंड बोथ दीज इक्वेशंस, ये दोनों ही इक्वेशंस सोलो मॉडल में बहुत ही इंपॉर्टेंट है. ओके, नाउ लेट्स टॉक अबाउट द प्रोडक्शन फंक्शन. सो एज आई टोल्ड यू, व्हाट इज प्रोडक्शन फंक्शन? हाउ इनपुट्स आर कन्वर्टेड इनटू आउटपुट, कैसे हमने इनपुट्स को आउटपुट में कन्वर्ट किया, उसी को हम प्रोडक्शन फंक्शन बोलते हैं. दैट इज कॉल्ड एज प्रोडक्शन फंक्शन. Now just try to see here. Here I have taken something which is called in microeconomics as a well-defined production function. Well-defined production function. माने अगर मेरे को इसको in microeconomics, if I were to go ahead and I were to plot this thing, तो I would have seen कि मेरे पास यहाँ से जो isoquants आते हैं, that would have been well-defined isoquants, proper convex isoquants बनते. You remember microeconomics, right? We would have got proper isoquants here. ठीक है? Another thing which is important in this production function is that if you notice the sum of the power alpha plus 1 minus alpha is coming out to be 1. And when the sum of power is 1, basically we know that it is nothing but constant returns to scale production function. What is constant returns to scale production function telling us? It tells us, क्या बताता है हमें, that when you scale your inputs, your output scales by same amount. हम जब भी इनपुट को स्केल करेंगे आउटपुट एग्जैक्टली सेम अमाउंट से स्केल होगा. So for example, in this case, let us just try to go ahead and check this out. So I have my production function as k to the power alpha, L to the power 1 minus alpha, and I'm going to go ahead and put lambda everywhere, right? And this is going to give me lambda to the power alpha, k to the power alpha, lambda to the power 1 minus alpha, L to the power 1 minus alpha. Or when I will take all lambdas together, I will get lambda, k to the power alpha, L to the power 1 minus alpha. And this is nothing but my original production function. And ये जो था, this was my scaled production function. So when I scaled my inputs, my output is lambda times the initial level of output, which means that it is following the constant returns to scale, right? So this is an important assumption of the Solow model, that in Solow model, you will have constant returns to scale. Mane, whenever you will be doubling your input, your output will exactly double itself. Whenever you will double your input, output will exactly double itself. ठीक है? Now let us go ahead. अच्छा, एक और बात है. We just assume alpha is between 0 and 1. Okay. Now there is another thing which is important here. There are two inputs, right? एक तो हो गया हमारा labors and दूसरा हो गया capital. So we have our labor and we have our capital, right? We assume that the labor gets W, which means the wage rate given to us for labor is W. And the capital gets rent. And the rental rate is given to us as R, right? So worker is going to get W and the capital is going to get R per unit that they go ahead and they work. We also assume that there is perfect competition in this market. तो perfect competition होने से क्या हो जाता है? We know that whenever we talk about perfect competition, there is no economic profit. कोई भी economic profit नहीं होता है. So if I were to write my profit function is total revenue minus total cost, right? And since it is perfect competition, we know that profit is going to be 0. I will get 0 profit. So when I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to get 0 profit, it actually goes ahead and it means that TR minus TC will be 0. So I will go ahead and get that TR will be equal to TC. Total revenue will be equal to total cost. Now, what is total revenue? Total revenue is price into quantity. What is total cost? I am either spending on labor or capital. So it is nothing but WL plus RK. Let us say, suppose that I am taking price at 1. I am normalizing price at 1. ठीक है, जरूरी नहीं है. You can keep price as it is also. You can normalize it at 1 also. So I will get 1 into Q equal to WL plus RK. Right? And we just said, हमने क्या बोला था कि जो हमारा output है वही GDP है. Output and GDP are the same thing. We said in one of the assumptions, right? So we can go ahead and we can therefore get the output is nothing but GDP. Y is equal to WL plus RK. So we are saying that the entire GDP of this economy, इस इकोनॉमी का जितना भी एग्रीगेट इनकम है, इस इकोनॉमी का जितना भी GDP है, it is going ahead and it is getting split between two people. One is the labor and second is the capital. दो लोगों में पूरा का पूरा GDP split हो रहा है. Nothing is left for the firms. No economic profit. Remember. So this is what we have got from here. So ये मेरा equation number 1 हो गया, that entire output is shared among labor and capital. Entire output is shared among labor and capital. Acha, let's go and take this a little further. Now, any firm, whether it is perfect competition or not, will always want to go ahead and maximize its profit. हमेशा वो अपने profit को maximize करने की कोशिश जरूर करेगा. How do you maximize your profit? Very simple. You find the first order condition. So here, in this particular profit equation, profit क्या है? Total revenue minus total cost. Total revenue क्या है? Price into quantity. Total cost क्या है? WLRK. So here, when we want to maximize the profit of the firm, there are only two things which are under the control of the firm. The firm wants to go ahead and decide the amount of labor that it wants to employ and the amount of capital it wants to employ. So only these two things are under the control of the firm, कि कितना labor लगाना है और कितना capital लगाना है. So when the firm would want to maximize its profit, the firm will go ahead and differentiate its profit with respect to labor, equate it to 0, differentiate it with respect to capital and equate it to 0. So this is what we are going ahead and we are doing here. We differentiate this with respect to labor, we equate this to 0, and we differentiate this with respect to capital and we equate this to 0. So now if you just go ahead and if you look here, right, let's differentiate the profit function with respect to labor. What will I get? Differentiating output with respect to labor minus W into 1 equal to 0. Right? So this will go ahead and give me, this is how output changes as labor changes. Marginal product of labor minus W equal to 0. So marginal product of labor is equal to W. So I will go ahead and I will get that the marginal product of labor is equal to wage rate. ये भी एक अपने आप में बहुत important conclusion है that you know how much wage is given to the labor, it is equal to the output that is produced by labor. So if I employ one labor, मैंने एक labor को employ किया and he is producing 10 units of the output. So I will go ahead and I will give him wage equal to the value of those 10 units of output. Actually, if you notice, यहाँ पर P को हमने 1 ले लिया है. But if this P would have existed, suppose ये P एक constant की तरह यहाँ पे होता, P into MPL होता, so this would have become value of marginal product of labor equal to wage rate. So how much wage will I be paying to the labor? It will be equal to the value of the output generated by that labor. तो अगर मैं 100 रुपए का आउटपुट बना रही हूँ, you give me 100 rupees. If I produce 200 units of worth of output, you give me 200. Right? This is an important equation. Now, here is another thing. So, what is the production function that we had taken? The production function that we had taken, that was basically this. K to the power alpha, L to the power 1 minus alpha. So, if I take this production function, K to the power alpha, L to the power 1 minus alpha, and I go ahead and I try to find the marginal product of labor. अगर मैं MPL निकालने का कोशिश करूं, so marginal product of labor will become how output changes as labor changes, right? And if I differentiate this with respect to L, what will I get? Power comes down, K to the power alpha, power reduces by 1, so this will be L to the power minus alpha, right? This will be nothing but 1 minus alpha k to the power alpha upon L to the power alpha. Okay. So I have gone ahead and I am able to see that the marginal product of labor will be 1 minus alpha k to the power alpha by L to the power alpha. Now look what I am doing. Just a little manipulation. If I just do L to the power 1 minus alpha here and L to the power 1 minus alpha here, I am multiplying the numerator and denominator with L to the power 1 minus alpha. So I will get 1 minus alpha, k to the power alpha, L to the power 1 minus alpha upon L, and this will become marginal product of labor. ठीक है? अगर हम इस पार्ट को देखें, if I try to look at this part, this is nothing but the value of output. यही मेरा production function था. So I'm going to go ahead and get 1 minus alpha into y by L. And we know that where my profit was getting maximized, marginal product of labor was equal to W. So instead of marginal product of labor, I will put W. Okay. So from here, if I just try to take labor here and output in the denominator, I will get WL by Y is equal to 1 minus alpha. तो इससे क्या पता चलता है? What am I getting? What information am I getting? It is helping me understand that if I try to find the share of labor in the total value of the output, it is going to be 1 minus alpha, right? Which was nothing but it was the power. जब हमने ये production function लिखा था, I was getting this as k to the power alpha, L to the power 1 minus alpha. तो यहाँ पे ये जो पावर है 1 minus alpha का, this basically reflects how much will be the share of labor in the total output. So for example, if I tell you that the total value of output is 100 rupees, right? And if I tell you कि मेरा production function कुछ ऐसा दिखता है, y is equal to k to the power 0.7, L to the power 0.3. So this equation is telling me that share of labor upon total value of output, माने 100, will be 1 minus alpha, that means 0.3. So share of labor will be 30 rupees. So out of the total value of output that we will be generating, जितना भी पूरा output होगा 100 rupees का, 30 rupees will be going to labor. Labor will get 30 rupees. Now you remember equation 1. What was equation 1 that we had studied? The equation 1 that we studied was y is equal to WL plus RK. This was coming because economic profits are 0. So we know that y is equal to WL plus RK. So if I go ahead and I divide throughout by y, I will get 1 is equal to WL by y plus RK by y. So RK by y will be nothing but 1 minus WL by y. और ये वाला शेयर मैंने अभी 1 minus alpha निकाल लिया है. We just found this as 1 minus alpha. So this is going to give me 1 minus 1 minus alpha, which means it will give me alpha. So the share of capital in the total value of output is this alpha, right? So वो जो 100 rupees generate हुए हैं, if 30 is going to the labor, the remaining 70 rupees will be going to the capital. And this will be the distribution of the output among labor and capital. इस तरीके से labor और capital में output distribute होगा in the Solow model. Another thing, ये देखो यहाँ पर तो मैंने इसको ऐसे verify किया, right? I just verified it using this thing. But you can just take this as a homework and try this. So if you will differentiate your profit equation with respect to capital and equate it to 0, you will get marginal product of capital is equal to rent. आपको ये equation मिल जाएगा, right? And this will exactly give you this part that RK by Y will come out as alpha. So just recheck this thing. जैसे हमने अभी labor के लिए किया, right? We differentiated it with respect to labor and we got MPL equal to W. And from here, we got that WL by Y is equal to 1 minus alpha. Similarly, you need to go ahead and take this as a homework and try to recheck it using profit maximizing condition. Is this clear? So now, let us go ahead and let us go towards the model. Okay, this I have done. So this is this. You can just try this. Differentiate with respect to capital. You will get MPK equal to R. And then just manipulate this equation a bit. And you will be able to get this. Right? So this is an important fact in the Solow model that payment to inputs are completely exhausted by giving the value to labor and capital. आप पूरा का पूरा जो भी आपका output generate हो रहा है, you are simply going ahead and you are giving that output to labor and capital. There is nothing left, right, for the entrepreneur. The economic profit of the firm, of the entrepreneur is zero. Okay, so you remember this, that we got WL by Y as 1 minus alpha, which is the share of output going to labor. And we got RK by Y equal to alpha, share of output going to the capital. Now,